have passed legislation to jail librarians who lend out harmful books to minors. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
West Covina, it's going to be a time. Norwalk, we're seeing troubles trying to clear. And Rolling Heights Industry, we're taking that 60 west at Fairway. 2 center lanes blocked with a crash. We're busy from Grand. The 105 east at the 605. Looks like the left lane to the connector of that 605 north is blocked with a wreck. We're busy from Paramount. West Covina on the 10 west at Vincent Glendora. Crash on the right side. Slowing us from Villa Verde. Seen a hazard in Mission Hills. If you're taking that 118 west approaching the 405, look out for a ladder in 2 of the right lanes.
Prime members save more at your Amazon Fresh store. As a Prime member, you'll save 10% on hundreds of items in store, from organic produce to pantry staples to handcrafted pizza. Head to Amazon.com/fresh locations and find a store near you.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Things continue to move in the right direction for Magic Johnson in his attempts to become part owner of the NFL Washington Commanders. The NFL Finance Committee had a conference call meeting on Monday and voted unanimously to approve the Commanders sale. Current owner Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the team for $6.05 billion. Magic is part of a group headed by billionaire Josh Harris that has agreed to buy the team. NFL owners still must vote Thursday in Minneapolis to give the sale final approval, but the Finance Committee's decision is crucial. The Finance Committee evaluates all potential owners when a team is up for sale. When an ownership group gets the blessing of the Finance Committee, the 32 team owners tend to vote the same way. Magic Johnson is just 2 days away from joining one of the most exclusive memberships in the world of sports. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
2 years ago, on Juneteenth 2021, KBLA Talk 1580 launched with a promise to give disenfranchised fellow citizens a voice in current political, economic, social, and cultural issues with an empowering, sustainable, and restorative language.
Everybody's got a little light under the sun, under the sun, under the sun, under the sun.
As we enter our 3rd year, we are delighted that KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerges as the talk station of choice for African American listeners. In a vigorous public opinion research study, the 2023 African American Media Issues Survey finds that for the 2nd consecutive year, KBLA Talk 1580 remains the most trusted, credible, and reliable media source in Southern California for African Americans and beyond. Furthermore, 80% of those surveyed agree that outlets like KBLA Talk 1580 provide honest and authentic content about the issues most important to the Black community directly from Black journalists who understand the issues that need to be addressed. At KBLA Talk 1580, we remain committed to curating conversations that matter to you. Thank you for your continued support. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. The station that sounds like the city looks. The city looks.
I'm Tavis Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580. Glad to have you with us today and in this hour. In case you are just tuning in, today is Nelson Mandela Day. And we just had a spirited conversation in our first hour today about the life and legacy of one Nelson Mandela. And we celebrate Mr. Mandela Madiba on today. In this hour, though, have you ever wondered about the unseen forces that shape our political landscape, the individuals who actually create our politicians and craft the campaigns that influence voter behavior and determine the outcome of elections? As the presidential campaign season begins in earnest, joined in this hour by sociologist and professor Dr. Daniel Laurison, author of Producing Politics, Inside the Exclusive Campaign World Where the Privileged Few Shape Politics for All of Us. Pleased to welcome Dr. Laurison to this program. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. It's good to be on. Thank you.
It's good to have you on. Thank you for your time. Let me start with a question that might seem a bit strange, but I think it's a decent starting point, and we will we'll jump from there. When you think about the fact that there really are just a handful of people, which is the point of your text, and we'll get into that, just a handful of people who really sort of create these politicians and craft their campaigns, and basically just find ways to influence the rest of us to vote the ways they want us to vote. It's just a small group of people. What say you about how that? Let me frame. I don't say this the right way. Frame that reality in the context of this alleged democracy that we live in. I think you take my point. It's just a few people, but we live in what we think is a democracy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't say it's not a democracy. There's many far less democratic countries in the world, of course, but
Sure.
I do think the fact that so much of our politics is run through, as you said, such a small set of people really constrains the amount of democracy that we have. And one of the main things I'm trying to get across in the book, which I think you picked up on, is that the way that our politics are run, the way that our campaigns are run, means that it just doesn't connect for a lot of regular people. And so a lot of regular people feel shut out. They feel disconnected. They feel like it doesn't affect them. And there's sort of a self-perpetuating cycle, right? If you feel like politics isn't for you, isn't about you, isn't speaking to you, then chances are you're not going to participate. And then people don't have much incentive, people inside politics, to try to cater to your needs. So there's sort of a nasty cycle, a vicious cycle operating, I think.
Yep. And to your point, which warrants some interrogating, so we'll do that right about now. Why do you think that politics these days does not connect for a lot of regular people?
I mean, I think, one of the things I try to say, and I show in the book, is that at least part of it's about who's running campaigns, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's disproportionately white. Even among Democrats, it's disproportionately people who went to elite colleges, which gives you at least a reasonable, makes it very likely that they're from rich families, although not everyone at an elite college is from a rich family, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them are. Most of the people I interviewed came up with a fair amount of privilege, came up, in isolation from sort of the struggles of regular people. And I think that shapes the kinds of politics that we get. So I think that's at least part of it. I think, from other research I'm doing right now, I've done a bunch of interviews with poor and working class people across Pennsylvania. The other thing I'm really seeing is just, people have a sense that not much changes, not enough changes. And so that also makes it hard to get people engaged.
Mm-hmm. I'm not naive in asking this because I've worked on a few campaigns myself
Right.
over the course of my career. But what is it that draws these few white privileged elites to work on campaigns in the first place? What's the end game for most of these people?
I think what draws them and what's the end game are maybe two slightly different questions.
Okay.
I think for a lot of people, what draws them in is they get excited about politics as kids, kind of the way many of us got excited about sports or about fashion or about any number of other sort of forms of essentially entertainment in our culture, right? And of course, politics is really different than sports or any number of other things because it directly affects people's lives. It affects what kind, how much benefits you're getting if you're on food stamps. It affects who has access to, what kinds of books are available in public libraries. It affects laws that affect trans and LGBT folks. It affects all of our lives. But I think for a lot of people in politics, it was, when they were kids, it was the thing they got geeky and excited about. And that, of course, is shaped by the kinds of families that they're in where they have access to that. In terms of the end game, though, I think for a lot of them, how they see their work and what they're doing is really about fighting with the other side. And it's really about getting access to, I almost titled the book The Room Where It Happens, right? Getting access to being in those halls of power, being the person making the decision both about what happens in the campaign and also what might happen if you become an advisor or a staff member to an elected official.
Yeah. When we come forward, and we're just getting started in this hour, talking with Dr. Daniel Laurison about his new book, Producing Politics Inside the Exclusive Campaign World, where the privileged few shape politics for all of us. The flip side of these white, privileged elite who run these campaigns are black political operatives. And we're going to have a conversation here in a moment about why there are so few black political operatives who run these campaigns and why they can't be a part of the few that shape politics for all of us. Most of you know that Donna Brazile, sister we love and respect, ran Al Gore's campaign. But the number of black people who've ever run major campaigns in this country for major candidates for president is very, very, very small, like Donna. And so when we come forward, that's something that we're going to unpack, and a great deal more that exists inside this book, Producing Politics, written by Daniel Laurison, you're listening to right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like Sprinklers in the Rain and Leaky Faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
Gotta stay fresh, ma. I don't shop with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
She's so smooth. So I'm interrupting my own shower to remind you to treat your skin like the queen she is with Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash, packed with Olay's highest level of vitamin B3 complex. It's so moisturizing that it will give you visibly smoother, head-turning skin in just 14 days. People wondering, how'd she get so smooth? Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash. Also, try Olay Hyaluronic Body Lotion.
Are you working way too hard for way too little? There's never been a better time to consider a career in IT. You could enjoy a recession-resistant career in a rewarding field with plenty of growth opportunities and often flexible work environments. Go to mycomputercareer.edu and take the free career evaluation. You can start your new career in months, not years. Take classes online or on campus, and financial aid is available to qualified students, including the GI Bill. Now's the time. Go to mycomputercareer.edu.
What's up, LA? The Reparationist community got something real special going down in historic Leimert Park. August 12th, 2023. This event is sponsored by Reparations United and Black Pact, fighting for justice and empowering our community. Together, we can make moves. We have an insane lineup for y'all. The sultry Rotimi, the king of LA, The Game, smooth Eric Benet, and none other than the powerful sounds of blackness. Also, we have some special guests in the house. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, State Senator Stephen Bradford, LA's beloved Councilwoman Heather Hutt, and many more. They're bringing their passion and leadership to the stage. Mark your calendars, August 12th, 2023, Leimert Park. Let's come together, support each other, and make a difference. Peace, love, and reparations benefit concert and unity rally. Be there or be left out. Produced by Tara Perry of Black Pact and Cam Howard of Reparations United.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Daniel Laurison, we were talking earlier about these white elite who run these campaigns as we are working our way into your book, Producing Politics, inside the exclusive campaign world where the privileged few shape politics for all of us. And it begs an obvious question. I mentioned Donna Brazile, personal friend, so just put that out there. But there are so few Donna Braziles who get a chance to run major campaigns for presidential candidates. Why is that?
Yeah, and that's such an important observation, and I think it's both important to note that there is Donna Brazile, and there's a few others who've had that sort of role, not at quite that high a level. But I think there's probably three main reasons why you don't see nearly enough Black and other people of color in high-level campaigns, even on the Democratic side, where the majority of voters of color are, right? Mm-hmm. And one is about how you get into campaign work. Generally speaking, in order to get a job, a high-level job on a campaign, you have to have started when you were 20 or 22, often working for free or for very little money, often moving, between states, sometimes multiple times in the same year. And so it's essentially the kind of unpaid internship that excludes anybody who doesn't come from, a fair amount of financial stability, doesn't have parents that can help them out, doesn't have anybody that they need to support back home. So, of course, it's, being from a poor working class family, obviously not all Black people are from poor working class families or vice versa, but for people who are, that's one thing that keeps them out. Another thing that keeps people out, Black people and other people of color, I think, is that the way people advance in campaigns, you might think, a campaign, either there's a win or a loss, so you can just look and see, the people on the winning campaign must have done a good job, the people on the losing campaign must have done a bad job. But for anybody who follows politics closely, you probably have a sense that that's not really how it works. A lot of things affect who wins or loses besides how good the campaign was, and it's actually really hard to make a good sort of honest, fair assessment of how effective people's work is in campaigns. And so what you get instead is a culture where people are assessed by essentially how well they fit in, by how much their views align with the views of the people around them or the people ahead of them. You see this in other fields as well. But it means that people who don't fit in, often, who are different in terms of race, different in terms of class, with the majority that's already there, those people are less likely to get ahead.
Yep.
So I think that's another piece of it.
Isn't that a pretty damning indictment of the Democratic Party? I'm going to get to women in just a second, so just put a pin in that. No, I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Let me stare at people of color just for a second here, Black people and other people of color. The fact that the Democratic Party would not be what it is without African-American voters, everybody knows, this ain't rocket science, that the most loyal constituency for years, decades now, in the Democratic Party are African Americans. And I've said many times that one party ignores us, the Republican Party, the other party, the Democratic Party, takes us for granted. But here you come now with this book that really goes behind the scenes of the campaign world and exposes who these privileged few are that really shape, again, the politics for all of us. But that's a pretty ugly indictment of the Democratic Party. That it is the party that sees itself as the big tent party, the big umbrella, pick your metaphor, and yet they still let white elites run campaigns, run the party, et cetera, et cetera. I grant you there's an African American right now who's head of the DNC. That aside, we're talking about campaigns, the folk who actually make this stuff happen every single day. But that is not a good look for the Democratic Party, and yet that reality endures. What say you about that?
Yeah, and I think you've summed it up really well. And I think there have been, I think, some moves within the Democratic Party to think about this a little bit. In 2020, most of the primary campaigns were put out statements about what percentage of their staff were people of color. There's some conversations happening about the fact that this is an issue, but it's not nearly as much as I think it ought to be, and it's not making as much change as I would like to see nearly as quickly as I think it ought to be. So I think, so I absolutely agree with you.
No, it's one of those. I mean, cut you off. It's one of those things where if you're at the end and you see things aren't working, it makes sense to go back to the beginning, right? My grandmother, Big Mama, used to always say, "You can't start out wrong and end up right." So if we're raising questions about why these campaigns And these candidates oftentimes don't connect to everyday people, connect to everyday voters, as you put it, regular people. Well, if regular people are people of color, if regular people are women, if regular people are et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and these aren't the folks running the campaigns, these aren't the folks shaping the messages, these aren't the folk we see out front, these aren't the folk making the money, these aren't the folk making decisions about how the spending is going to be how the spending is going to be approached when it comes to media buys, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if all that's true, then it ain't rocket science. It's not a conundrum to figure out why this stuff isn't connecting in the end, because they didn't start out right in the beginning. I digress on that point. Let me pivot to this issue of women. We've been talking about black folk and people of color, but take me inside your research and tell me how women are regarded or not running campaigns. I'm thinking now of my friend Susan Estridge. As I recall, I think I'm right about this, Susan was, I think, the first woman to ever run a major presidential campaign. She ran Mike Dukakis's campaign, you may recall. So Susan Estridge made history then, but history is there's not a long list of folk historically, women who've run these major presidential campaigns. How do I read that, Daniel Laurison?
Yeah. I mean, so if I look at the statistics, the Democratic Party is almost even with Democratic voters in terms of the percentage of staff who've worked in major national elections who are women. But if you look at the top, you're absolutely right. It's still, a little bit less so recently. Hillary Clinton had one of the more racially and gender diverse inner circles that we've seen in quite a while, actually. But if you look at the top, it's still very disproportionately men, and I think that goes, to an aspect of the culture that is especially difficult for women, but it's really difficult for anybody who wants to have any kind of balanced or reasonable life, wants to see their kids, et cetera, which is just that the expectation is that during campaign seasons you work. I had one of my interviewees tell me, she got a job at on a primary in New Hampshire, and she got there and she was told, we're going to work every day from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. That quickly turned into 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. and then 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and then basically, around the clock. I start the book with a story about getting involved at just the very lowest level of the Obama campaign in California, and even there, the culture was such that it just felt basically impossible to leave the office. If I left the office, I was going to miss something, and I ended up, with some real serious tension with my partner. We had a baby who turned 1 during that election, and I just wasn't, I wasn't home, I wasn't attentive, I wasn't getting enough sleep, and it was all through this sort of culture of like, well, we have to do everything we possibly can before Election Day. But it's not really clear to me that I think that culture keeps a lot of people out. I don't think it's a healthy way to live, and I think I'm not convinced that it's necessary, that it's the way that things have to be run.
Yeah. This is not a question about campaigns and producing politics per se, which is the subject of your text, but it's connected, and I think you'll appreciate the question. At least I hope you will. So we know there's been great debate, and the debate isn't completely settled yet. But we know there's great debate inside the Democratic Party about the primary calendar and which states are going to go first. And so Joe Biden has made it clear he wants South Carolina to go first. There are other persons, of course, who are in line with that. And the reason for that is that these states that have tended to go first historically, Iowa and New Hampshire, frankly, don't look like America. We are the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic nation we've ever been. That ain't what Iowa looks like. That ain't what New Hampshire looks like. And so in many states, in many respects, these states are not just small states. And I understand the value of retail politics, being able to shake hands and meet people in small states like Iowa and New Hampshire. I get that. But Iowa and New Hampshire look nothing like what the country actually looks like. And so there's been a great deal of pressure on the Democratic side to push South Carolina to the top of the schedule, at the top of the calendar as the first primary. I raise that because I want to get your take on the following. Again, it's not about how we change campaigns. It's not about how we reshape, the few who decide these politics for all the rest of us, but it is a critical, I think, component to making the process a bit more democratic. That's my read. What's your read?
I would agree with that entirely. I think, a huge amount of time gets spent by campaign staff and by candidates in those first few primary states, because those tend to really set the tone, the momentum for who ends up getting the nomination. It's not 100% a guarantee, but if you generally speaking, if you lose both Iowa and New Hampshire, most of the time people aren't going to be the nominee. And so, I think there's two things that would be good about moving to having South Carolina or other much more racially diverse states in the early in the primary calendar. And one is, as you said, just reflecting the country better. I think it also would mean that people would have to learn how to campaign in places that aren't predominantly white and predominantly small and rural towns. And I think that would be a real benefit to the Democratic Party and to our politics overall.
Yep. Looking at my clock here, I got news and traffic and sports in about 2.5 minutes. Let me get this frame out, and we'll get started perhaps, and then continue when we come forward on the other side. But I was thinking, as you were talking a moment ago, about a comedian who tells a pretty funny story. And I'm not a comedian, so don't expect me to deliver this as a comedian would on stage. But this comedian basically tells the joke, a female comedian basically tells the joke that when you meet women, you're not really meeting the woman, you're meeting the woman's representative. And the joke, of course, is you got the eyelashes, you got the weave, you've got the implants, you've got this, you've got the other, you got the makeup, you got all that. You're really, on the first couple of dates, not meeting her, you're meeting her representative. I couldn't tell that joke, but a female comedian can tell that joke. It's funny, and we all get the point. I raised that because I'm wondering these days, given what you've researched and written about in this text, whether or not we're actually meeting these people on the campaign trail as they are, or whether or not the way the game is crafted, the way the game is shaped, we're really meeting their representative. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that's been a concern about our politics for quite a while, as the size of the electorate has expanded, as politics has had to become, or at least as people who run it have believed, it's had to become more sort of retail, more broadcast, more, you have to sort of present the same image everywhere. There's been a lot of energy that goes into crafting candidate images, crafting messages, etc. And I think you're right that I don't know if the analogy to the joke is exactly it, but I think you're right that you don't see exactly who a politician is. I'm not convinced that's the largest issue. I think what concerns me almost more is what campaigns think they need to do in crafting that image, and how that might lose a lot of people.
All right, so hold that thought. When we come forward, talk about what concerns you more deeply, what campaigns have to do to craft that image, those images. That's what we'll pick up when we come forward in our conversation with Dr. Daniel Laurison. His book is called Producing Politics Inside the Exclusive Campaign World, where the privileged few shape politics for all of us. I'm Tavis Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. House Republicans are accusing the Biden administration of weaponizing the Justice Department to go after Donald Trump. Trump today announced he received a letter telling him he's a target in Special Counsel Jack Smith's criminal investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election, suggesting he may soon face another indictment. Former President Obama is applauding librarians for standing on the front lines against book bans. In a letter to American librarians, Obama slammed recent censorship attempts on books that discuss topics like gender, sexuality, or race. According to the Washington Post, at least 19 states over the past 2 years have passed legislation to jail librarians who lend out harmful books to minors. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
West Covina, it's going to be a tie. Norwalk, we're seeing troubles trying to clear. And Rolling Heights Industry, we're taking that 60 west at Fairway. 2 center lanes blocked with a crash. We're busy from Grand. The 105 east at the 605. Looks like the left lane to the connector of that 605 north is blocked with a wreck. We're busy from Paramount. West Covina on the 10 west at Vincent Glendora. Crash on the right side. Slowness from Villa Verde. Seen a hazard in Mission Hills. If you're taking that 118 west approaching the 405, look out for a ladder in 2 of the right lanes.
Prime members save more at your Amazon Fresh store. As a Prime member, you'll save 10% on hundreds of items in store, from organic produce to pantry staples to handcrafted pizza. Head to Amazon.com/fresh locations and find a store near you.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Things continue to move in the right direction for Magic Johnson in his attempts to become part owner of the NFL Washington Commanders. The NFL Finance Committee had a conference call meeting on Monday and voted unanimously to approve the Commanders sale. Current owner Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the team for $6.05 billion. Magic is part of a group headed by billionaire Josh Harris that has agreed to buy the team. NFL owners still must vote Thursday in Minneapolis to give the sale final approval, but the Finance Committee's decision is crucial. The Finance Committee evaluates all potential owners when a team is up for sale. When an ownership group gets the blessing of the Finance Committee, the 32-team owners tend to vote the same way. Magic Johnson is just 2 days away from joining one of the most exclusive memberships in the world of sports. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The Los Angeles Urban League helps African American and others in underserved communities achieve true social parity, economic self-reliance, and civil rights. For over 100 years, Los Angeles Urban League has ensured our communities have access to careers with living wages, opportunities to start and grow businesses, and clear pathways to personal and professional growth. Programs like Biz Camp, Construction Career Academy, Bob Business Ready, and B-Warp. The Black Wealth Attainment and Retention Program are examples of the ongoing events designed to make our centennial mission to rebuild Black Wall Street right here in LA a reality. To sign up for our newsletter or to support the Los Angeles Urban League with your time, talent, and donations, visit laul.org. That's laul.org. The Los Angeles Urban League is a proud sponsor of Urban Family Focus, Saturdays at 7 a.m. on KBLA Talk 1580.
Where are we on the lineup?
It's official. Avery is producing Main Street Music Days.
We need to be ready. We're going to have lots of people. What's the status on the new sound engineer?
They need an audio technician to keep things level from sound checks to encores.
Make sure audio from one stage does not compete with another.
Indeed can help them hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Our hiring platform instantly connects you with quality candidates, and you can schedule and conduct virtual interviews right from the Indeed dashboard. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
For adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis who are candidates for systemic or phototherapy, now there's Skyrizi, Risankizumab Rizza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieve 90% clear skin at 4 months, and Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Nothing in me go hand in hand. Nothing on my skin, that's my new plan. Nothing is every day.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
With Skyrizi, you could achieve 90% clearer skin. Ask your doctor about the #1 dermatologist prescribed biologic in psoriasis and visit skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKY-RIZZI to learn more.
Hey, I am D.L. Hughley, host of the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, heard weekdays from 2 to 4 exclusively on KBLA Talk 1580. I promise to make you think a little, but laugh a whole lot more. So tune in to the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show 2 to 4 only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio, KBLA Talk 1580.
Daniel Laurison is an associate professor of sociology at Swarthmore College. His new book is called Producing Politics: Inside the Exclusive Campaign World Where the Privileged Few Shape Politics for All of Us. Before news, traffic, and sports, you were teeing up, Professor Laurison, this notion of what really does bother you about the way campaigns feel they have to go about crafting their messages. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, sure. So I think, you made the comparison to sort of, is the politician a real person, or are you just getting their representative? And I think the issue is that the representatives, the campaign staff, the advisors are also, they're who's crafting politicians' messages when they're on campaigns. They're also largely who's advising them once they get elected. And so it matters in some ways to me less, who Joe Biden is deep in his core. And it matters to me a lot more who he's listening to when he makes decisions about what bills he's going to try to get passed, or what messages he's going to try to get across when he runs for re-election again. And so that, the fact that most of the people who are doing politics for their whole careers are, as we were talking about earlier, generally speaking, from relatively well-off families, generally speaking, more likely to be white than not, generally speaking, more likely to be men, also likely to be people who, are willing to give up their whole lives for politics. That means they're really cut off from the concerns of poor and working class people, the concerns of people of color often, and that means we don't get politics that can reach those people as well as I think they ought to.
To the point you're raising now, I have issues with this phrase from time to time, and I don't have time to unpack that right now. But given what you just said, give me your sense of the way these campaigns now more than ever play what many call identity politics.
Yeah, I have issues with that phrase as well.
Yeah.
But, I think partly because it implies that some people's identities are, disposable or unimportant or et cetera, and not sort of the core of their civil rights, right? But I think, right now we're seeing, I'm a transgender man, right now we're seeing the Republicans use trans people as basically what's the word? A scary monster, essentially, to scare people into voting for them and scare people about what the Democrats might do. And I don't think we're seeing, as effective as I'd like response to that. And I think it's again, and there's all, we saw that around, we see it around immigrants. It changes from year to year. Who's the boogeyman? That's the word I was looking for earlier, not scary monster. But, it changes from year to year which group gets to be the boogeyman. But it's often around gender and sexuality, and it's often around race as well. And I think if I was really struck, I'll say it sort of the other way. I was really struck. I was doing an interview with somebody in Pennsylvania during the 2022 election, and they saw right through a lot of this. There was this whole attempt to cast John Fetterman as anti-black because of an incident where he chased somebody. And I don't know what actually happened with that incident, but somebody I was talking to was really able to say clearly that's just people trying to play politics, right? That's just trying to dig up something that makes somebody look bad. And I think that's what so much of our politics ends up being, is just casting one group or another as the monster or as the boogeyman, and that turns a lot of people off of politics.
I want to see if I can connect two things here and get your take on the following. I want to see if I can weave the notion of polling, which all these campaigns rely on more than they should, I think, but polling that oftentimes is incorrect. We all thought Hillary was going to win that election against Donald Trump. Obviously, she did not. So the polls were way off that night. So I want to connect this notion of polling to the notion of preconceived notions about voters that most all of these campaigns have. So talk to me about the ways in which you think these campaigns now more than ever rely on all kind of polling data. And how that data allows them then to have these sort of preconceived notions about who voters are, what voters think, and how voters are going to cast their votes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a social scientist. I use surveys in my research. I think they can get at a lot of stuff for you, but there's two big limitations, I think, especially maybe three, especially the way campaigns use them, right? One is a poll can only answer questions that you ask. Right. So if you're only thinking in terms of, a lot of the times people are only thinking in terms of who's going to be that fulcrum demographic, who's going to be that little teeny slice of the electorate who's going to be movable. You can ask questions that might get at that, but it can't tell you, a poll can't tell you how you actually move those people. It can't tell you if you're looking under the wrong corners. It can't tell you how to think about things. I think more broadly, the issue is that a poll is not really a way of understanding where people are at in their lives, right? And what a lot of our politics is missing, if you ask me at least, is any way for communication to go from the ground up, right? From regular people into campaigns. And I think part of that is just, we don't have very much emphasis on talking to people, on just doing the field part of campaigns. And when we do have field, there's stories from so many recent losses where the people on the ground in the running the field operations were saying, I'm hearing from regular voters, they're saying, I got this story from somebody who was on Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020, and they were saying everybody just wants to know who can beat Trump, and the Bernie Sanders leadership was like, that's not our frame, that's not what we're doing, and they lost that opportunity. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is another question. Very similarly, there were a lot of stories on the Hillary Clinton campaign of people on the ground raising concerns, and people in the central office basically saying, we have our data, we have our models, we have our polls, your observations are not going to be helpful to us. I think they really were wrong about that.
Yeah. I asked you a moment ago, and you just responded to my question about preconceived notions, which takes me straightway into a conversation now. Beyond preconceived notions about the implicit bias, oftentimes of these white privileged elites who run these campaigns. Talk to me about that part of the story.
Sure. I think there's a couple things going on. I think one thing is actually that a lot of where people can get, most people in campaigns, despite all these criticisms that I have of them, they genuinely want to do a good job, right? They want their candidates to win. They're not, there's a critique that I don't think is particularly right, that they're mostly just trying to make money, or they're not, they don't really care about the issues. Most people I talk to on both sides do really care about the issues and do want their side to win. But it's really hard to get good feedback when you're running a campaign about what is actually reaching people. What you get feedback about is how the other side is reacting. And so you get a lot of, I think, campaign strategies and tactics that are at least implicitly as much about sort of zinging the other side or getting a rise out of them or et cetera as they are about reaching people where they're at. So I think that's part of it. I think also a lot of people who work in politics, like, they know that their level of engagement and interest in politics is weird and unusual, but they don't necessarily have great insight, many of them, into how to connect politics for regular people. And I think a lot of what they end up doing is thinking, we just have to repeat the same message over and over and over and over, drill it into people's heads, hit them over the head with it, some of them said, and that will get through to people. So I think that's another part of it. And then, of course, the thing you're alluding to, the more direct issue is, a white person from a suburban background probably has a fairly good guess about how to get their Uncle Bob to maybe change his vote. But they're going to have a much less good guess about how to get a Latino 32-year-old single dad in Albuquerque to change his vote, right? Or whatever, name any group that you're trying to win that's not suburban white people, and you see the challenge there.
Yep. When we come forward in our conversation with Dr. Daniel Laurison, author of the book Producing Politics, Inside the Exclusive Campaign World Where the Privileged Few Shape Politics for All of Us, I want to pursue a line of questioning about the following. One, get his take on how he indicts these campaigns on the left and on the right. What's his indictment of these political campaigns when it comes to creating a political environment that's oftentimes confusing, polarizing, and certainly alienating to many of us voters? What's his indictment of this whole campaign apparatus in that regard, number one? And number two, how am I to read the fact that these days, more than ever, the campaigning never stops? He sort of walked up to this line a moment ago and got chalk on his shoes, but he didn't quite step over it. I want to step over that line and talk about what it means that the same people who run the campaigns then go into the offices with these politicians, and the campaigning essentially never stops. We'll do that when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Attention boss ladies, it's time to refresh, restore, and renew. Announcing the Restored Leadership Brunch and Wellness Summit, Saturday, July 22nd at Levels in downtown Los Angeles. Enjoy delicious brunch and refreshing mimosas while networking with other boss ladies. Meet representatives from Nike, Puma, and the Los Angeles Lakers. And prepare to unlock your inner CEO with the amazing Dr. Karen, founder of the MK Circle CEO Institute. Sis, it's hard to prioritize yourself. That's why the Vermont Slauson Economic Development Corporation created the Restored Leadership Brunch and Wellness Summit. Connect, discover, refuel, and realign. Save your seat now at restoredevents.com. This is an exclusive event and seats will fill up fast. That's Saturday, July 22nd at 12 noon at Levels Downtown, located at 888 South Olive Street. Register now at restoredevents.com.
Have you heard about Lendistry? Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered right here in LA. Once you've started your business, Lendistry provides flexible financing options starting at $50,000 to help you access the affordable capital needed to grow. Whether financing is needed to increase working capital, acquire a business, purchase inventory and equipment, or refinance debt, Lendistry has a solution for you. Lending products range from traditional business term loans and non-revolving lines of credit to SBA 7A loans and commercial real estate financing. Lendistry's pre-application process is simple and does not impact your credit score. Visit lendistry.com/KBLA to learn more and to get started with an application right from the website.
To my hometown, my community. Some of you have known me my whole life. Do you notice anything different about the kids in the neighborhood? Ever paid attention? We might start with gifts, money, attention. These are signs. Child trafficking is happening right here in this town. So don't just watch through the window. Pay attention. Because the more we know, the more we'll all know to say no. Learn the signs to look for and how to help at no-to-say-no.com.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
Dr. Daniel Laurison is a professor of sociology at Swarthmore College and author of the book Producing Politics Inside the Exclusive Campaign World, where the privileged few shape politics for all of us. Continuing now our conversation for the few minutes we have left in this hour. I said a moment ago, Dr. Laurison, that I was going to ask you about the following, as I will right now. Your indictment, to the extent you have one, and it appears to me that you do, given the text, of course, an indictment of all these campaigns, left, right, center, you tell me, and the role that they play in creating a political environment that is oftentimes confusing, polarizing, and certainly alienating for many of us. And I could spend, hours, and I have, in fact, spent hours indicting my profession, the media profession, for the role that we play in that regard. But it seems to me that the role that the media plays is not disconnected from these campaigns, because in large measure, as you well know, the media takes its cues from these campaigns. I pass the mic to you.
Yeah. And I mean, and part of what campaigns are trying to do is to influence the media to report on them in the way that they want to be reported on. So it's sort of another sort of self-perpetuating cycle that you see there. I think what might be more fruitful, partly because I'm an optimist, and partly because I think I've said some of my my key critiques before, right? Like the who makes up these campaigns is disproportionately white people from privileged backgrounds, et cetera. Is to say what I think they could be, right? You could have campaigns where the people running field offices, the people whose job it is to actually manage volunteers and talk to voters, are the youngest, the least experienced, the least valued, often the least well paid of all the people in campaigns, right? You could and the people who run communications offices are the best paid and also the most likely to be white of all the people in campaigns. You could reverse that status hierarchy, right? right? You could really invest in people whose job it is to connect directly to people where they are, to get to know, communities and neighborhoods and make sure they feel connected, not just during a campaign season. You know, I've done a lot of volunteer canvassing, and one thing you hear when you knock on people's doors is, yeah, the Democratic Party sends somebody to knock on my door once every 2 or 4 years, and I don't hear from them again, right, until the next time they want my vote. You could have a year-round organizing infrastructure that's dedicated to really helping people see, the Infrastructure Act that Biden passed was able to, contributed this money, which is why your cousin down the street has a job right now. That's something we could do, but it's not what we currently do, right? Mm-hmm. So much of campaigns is focused on sort of this high-level airwaves battle. And there's actually, when you look at research on campaigns, it's really hard to see how much that makes a difference. But when you look at research on door knocking, on talking to people where they are, that's the one thing that's been shown over and over again, both to change people's minds on tricky issues and to bring people out to vote who otherwise might not. No. So that's what I think campaigns could be.
No, the TV ads, I think you're right about, eventually reach a point of diminishing returns when you've seen it so many times and there's so many of them. Yeah. And every commercial break, you're getting the same commercials. You tune it out eventually. It becomes, you get tone deaf to it because, I think it's overkill at some point. When we come forward in our remaining moments, there are a couple of things I want to get to, including the money in these campaigns. We talked earlier about why and how it is. And what a tragedy it is that the folk who run these campaigns politically, nationally, always tend to be white, privileged elites. And there's another reason for that, because the money these white, privileged elites make is stupid. You look at any of these campaign expenditures, certainly at the presidential level. These folk make a whole lot of money consulting and running these campaigns. And that ain't money they're trying to give to black folk or brown folk or red or yellow people. There's another reason, again, you can consider for why these political operatives look the way that they look. We'll talk about that. And finally, we'll get Professor Laurison's take on why and what it means that the campaigning never stops. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
The rent is too damn high. KBLA joins you in calling for affordable housing. The LA Tenants Union is a diverse, tenant-led movement fighting for the human right to housing for all. The LA Tenants Union demands safe, affordable housing and union rent control. They organize against landlord harassment, mass evictions, and displacement, and mobilize for the repeal of the Ellis Act and Costa-Hawkins Act. The LA Tenants Union is on a mission to strengthen tenants' political power through education, advocacy, and direct action. To get help with your eviction or other landlord-tenant issues, take action for justice, or become a member, visit latenantsunion.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like Sprinklers in the Rain and Leaky Faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on.
K-Drip. Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Daniel Laurison, you know this well because you researched it. You wrote the book, Producing Politics. There's a whole lot of money that these campaigns pay these political operatives. And to my mind, that's another reason why you don't see these positions filled by people of color oftentimes and filled by women. As a person who owns a media outlet and has for some time, I know full well the fight that we have to engage in with campaigns, and I mean Democratic campaigns, who are trying to attract the people that listen to this station. You have to fight with them to get them to spend some real money advertising on your station, but they'll spend money everywhere else. But you have to fight for it, and they just expect that black folk are going to line up and vote for them anyway. I digress on that point, but talk to me about the money that these operatives are making in these campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, it's a field, I mean, like journalism, and in many ways, like we're seeing the actors and writers strike in film and TV right now, where the people at the very top make an enormous amount of money. When I first started doing this research, I was in graduate school, and I went into absolutely some of the wealthiest, fanciest, most intimidating homes and offices I'd ever been in at that point, doing some of these interviews. But it's also worth remembering that there's an awful lot of people who are trying to break in, and either who can't because the pay is so low at the very beginning, or who or who are more or less just making regular people salaries as well. So there's huge variation, but I agree with you. The top is incredibly well paid, too well paid, and there's also just so much money flowing through, and that's one of the reasons I think they could do other things with that money, right? They could not spend on the 6th, 7th, 8th Joe Biden ad in the hour of watching TV with my kid that I saw last, in 2020, and focus on field operations, on paying the people who are just getting into it well enough that they can make it a sustainable career. Yeah.
Let me close with this then. I said earlier a couple of times that one of the things that troubles me about the way we campaign these days is that the campaigning never stops. It's hard to know where the line is between campaigning and governing, as I see it. How do you see it?
I think that's right, and I mentioned this earlier, but a huge portion of the people who are advising elected officials are the same people that run their campaigns or that ran their campaigns. There's close to half of people who've ever been in a national level campaign end up with a job in government or working for an elected official at some point. And so I think the mindset that you get in campaigns, that it's about sticking it to the other guy, that it's about the reaction that you can get from the other side, that it's about crafting a message that's sort of bland and not too honest and fit, could work a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of places, and also the message that you're not, that the people you focus on are those sort of marginal swing voters rather than your base, the constituency that does turn out to vote for you every time. I think all of that is contributes to a politics that is just not as representative. As you said at the beginning, are we a democracy? I think we're not as full of a democracy as we could or ought to be if a lot of these systems work differently.
Got 90 seconds to go. What do you hope, and you may have just teed it up now with that last comment, what do you hope the takeaway is from all the research you did to produce this book, Producing Politics?
I mean, I would really love to see, especially, I think it would be good if it were all of politics, but I care much more, and I think the Democrats have much better politics overall. So I would love to see Democratic campaigns really figuring out how to be more diverse, to bring more people into working in politics. I'd love to see people with real progressive values see the Democratic Party as a place that they could make a career, and not just the people who are sort of more centrist or mainstream feeling like it's a good place for them. And I'd love to see campaigns that really try to reach out not just to the swing voters, but to everybody in this country who has a stake in our politics. And I think that is especially Black people, other people of color, and low-income and working-class people.
Daniel Laurison's work focuses oftentimes on class inequality, social mobility, political participation and campaigns, as you now know, and race and class inequality in politics. He's an associate professor of sociology at Swarthmore College. His latest book is called Producing Politics: Inside the Exclusive Campaign World Where the Privileged Few Shape Politics for All of Us. Thank you for this conversation, Dr. Laurison. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for sharing a part of your Tuesday with us here on the Black Information Network. I'm Mike Moore. Now, here's the latest. Alabama House and Senate members will reconvene for the second day of a special legislative session today to continue work on a new set of congressional district maps, despite being ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court to create maps to include two majority